Ambassador, you have so much experience with these issues, the former U.S. trade rep. I just want to get your take so far on the fact that we did see these tariffs be enacted at midnight today. A lot of people thought it was just a negotiation tactic, and also the response from some of these other nations.
Well, look, I think President Trump has made clear that he very much likes to use tariffs as a tool, not just for economic policy, for broader foreign policy. And tariffs can be a source of leverage. They can be a source of revenue, and they can be a way of encouraging companies to move their production to the U.S. I think the question right now is, things have become more expensive for American consumers and for American manufacturers who import inputs into their manufacturing process from other countries. For example, in the auto sector, the North American auto sector is a fully integrated sector. A car parts may pass over the border 7 or 8 times in the making of a car. Now, each part is going to be subject to tariffs each time it goes across. That's going to raise the price of American cars and make them less competitive. And then you've got the issue of retaliation. As your reporters noted, China, all the countries are preparing and are announcing retaliation lists. In Trump 1, during the first Trump administration, the Trump administration collected about $70 billion of revenues from China, and 92% of that went to pay off the farmers that China had retaliated against. So not much new for the Treasury. Things are going to become more expensive. There's going to be disruption. And the question is, what are we negotiating for? Leverage is great if it's actually used to negotiate a solution to problems. But what does he want from Canada, Mexico, and China? And there really isn't a clear agenda yet over how these tariffs are going to be used to reach an overall agreement.
You're saying leverage is great, and you've mentioned the word "can" a number of times, that tariffs can do some different things. I was speaking to an expert from the Cato Institute yesterday. They said tariffs, they impact foreign policy about 20% of the time. They're not necessarily so effective. I want to ask you, the retaliation, as we look at that, as someone who's negotiated trade deals, once we get to a point of retaliation from other countries, does that spiral into just a worse and worse situation, or does that lead both sides to come back to the negotiating table? Because there is a lot to lose when it comes to economic activity and GDP.
The challenge is, once tariffs are in place, people and industries get used to it. And so they're very hard to ramp back after being put in place. The industries that get that protection like that protection. And so they don't want to see it reduced. You saw that the Trump administration imposed a lot of tariffs on China, and the Biden administration kept them on and added a few more. Even though there were efforts to review the tariffs to see which were really strategic and which we could afford to reduce, because the pressure was there to keep them on. And so I do fear that once you oppose tariffs, you're ratcheting up the costs of goods, and it's very hard to reduce them. And at a time when there are already a lot of inflationary pressures, including a lot of other policies like tax cuts that can add to inflation, tariffs is not very helpful.
What about when it comes to sentiment, whether it comes to businesses here in the U.S. or foreign businesses? How do you think this impacts them? I mean, there was questions about uncertainty, but now we have quite a bit of certainty. We are going to see these tariffs. What do you think that means for foreign direct investment and also the confidence of U.S. companies to hire and grow their businesses?
Well, we have more certainty than we did yesterday that they actually are going to go into effect. What we don't know is how long they're going to be in effect for. The president just referred to in the clip you showed that these are for punishment. So it's unclear, are these permanent? Are there a country to be punished until what? And so companies have to decide, is this the new reality, the new normal? And do they need to change their supply chains in order to adjust to that? Supply chains are difficult to change. They take investment. They take capital investment and years oftentimes to change, particularly if you're going to move production back to the United States, which tends to be more expensive than where they originally situated it. And so companies have to decide, is there enough certainty to make those kinds of decisions? I think a lot of companies will still sit it out because it's unclear how long these tariffs will be put in place, and then have to make decisions somewhere down the road.
Ambassador, if you don't mind, I want to go back to another job that you had. We kind of listed some of your resume. You were formerly the Chief of Staff of the Secretary of the Treasury. The U.S. relies on a lot of foreign governments and foreign other people outside the U.S. to buy our bonds. We've seen a lot of sentiment when it comes to the other countries and other governmental blocs like the EU. In fact, the Vice President of the EU saying it's time for a new leader of the free world. Do you think this impacts the foreign buying of our bonds and just the general confidence in the U.S. when it comes to that kind of business?
I don't. I think the U.S. is still the strongest economy, advanced industrialized economy in the world. We have deep capital markets. We have strong rule of law, and people want to put their assets someplace safe where they can rely on it, like the United States. There are issues that affect our long-term credibility, including our fiscal situation, our debt situation, how we use our financial system for sanctions, which can sort of erode the role of the dollar and dollar debt in the system. But I don't think tariffs fundamentally are going to affect the desirability by central banks and others to hold U.S. debt.
Should we be worried about retaliation besides tariffs, other actions by other countries to impact our economy? And if so, what might they be?
Absolutely. And you've already seen that in the case of China, where it's not just imposing tariffs on a bunch of agricultural products, but it's looking at sensitive technologies where U.S. companies are still reliant on China for parts or for inputs. And they know whether it's, again, critical minerals, rare earth minerals, or critical technologies that go into even our defense companies, that they have certain technology that our companies need. And now they're going to use export controls, the unreliable entity list, in order to restrict our access to that. So they have leverage too. And I think that's the question is, this becomes a tit for tat. Because we import so much more from China than they import from us, there's only so much they can do with regard to tariffs. They can punish us, they can raise our prices, but when it comes to other mechanisms, other tools that they have at their disposal, they can deny us access to critical inputs that we need for our economy, including our electric vehicles, our battery production, et cetera.